Yeah, actually, so I've dealt with Paul Atkins for several years now. Actually, one of the first people I met when I was working on crypto policy on Capitol Hill with Warren Davidson back in 2017 and 2016 was Paul Atkins. I've met with him several times. He was one of our participants at the roundtable I hosted for Warren Davidson and several other members of Congress that had 50 CEOs. He was one of those execs.
This content is brought to you by BitGo, which is one of the top crypto custodians in the crypto industry. BitGo works with many big companies and brands, such as Pantera Capital, Bitstamp, and Bitcoin IRA. Nike also selected BitGo to power its wallets for its NFTs. And BitGo has many great services, such as hot wallets, custodial wallets, self-managed cold wallets, and NFT wallets. Many institutions trust BitGo with its top-level security and incredible services, such as being able to deploy your capital while it's in custody, which includes lending, borrowing, trading, staking, DeFi access, and more. If you'd like to learn more about BitGo, please visit bitgo.com, link in the description. Welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and my guest today is Ron Hammond, who's the Director of Government Relations at the Blockchain Association. Ron, it's a great morning. Bitcoin is over $100,000. It's good to see you.
It is a great morning. It's been a lot happening here, but it's all positive. And again, that is a pretty unique thing in the crypto space, especially policy. So looks like there's more to come. So can't wait to dive into all of it.
Absolutely. So, Ron, yesterday, President-elect Donald Trump announced his nomination for the next SEC chair, and that is Paul Atkins. Tell us about your thoughts on this news and if you have any background on Paul.
Yeah, actually, so I've dealt with Paul Atkins for several years now. Actually, one of the first people I met when I was working on crypto policy on Capitol Hill with Warren Davidson back in 2017 and 2016 was Paul Atkins. I've met with him several times. He was one of our participants at the roundtable I hosted for Warren Davidson and several other members of Congress that had 50 CEOs. He was one of those execs in that meeting. So he's been incredibly helpful, instrumental for years. So the good thing about him is that he knows a lot of the policy issues and a lot of the rifts within the actual crypto space itself. And I think that's really important because having that ability balanced view is really important for the SEC because it's not going to be a complete free for all. Some folks have been maybe saying on social media and such. They still have to, I don't know, at least enforce in this space. There's plenty of stuff to go after too in terms of scam and fraud still. But at the same time, also understand that we need clear rules of the road. And it seems like that's going to be a really good way for him to kind of lead into what Hester Peirce and Mark Ueda have been leading up for quite some time. And then building off that to actually getting some rules and regs on the books once he gets confirmed. So overall, really positive pick. And this is one of several pro crypto positive picks we've seen from the Trump administration. And looks like there's probably more to come.
Absolutely. And I've noticed, Paul, to your point, he has been critical of Gary Gensler's approach with regulation by enforcement. He has endorsed Hester Peirce's safe harbor proposal. I know he was advising some crypto companies like Securitize and so forth. And you mentioned like you knew of him or know him, known him since back in the day, and he's very much aware of crypto. So he seems to be a very solid pick. And to your point, the SEC still needs to do his job, stop bad actors, stop fraud, stop scams, but we don't want regulation by enforcement. We want to be able to work with the industry.
Exactly. And I think the threat of regulation by enforcement, and that's why we're seeing probably a lot of the market react so well accordingly, is dissipating very quickly. And the understanding that it might take some time to get the regs on the books or for Congress to pass a law, but that threat of the regulation by enforcement dissipating is massive. And we have seen that relief all across the industry. There's still a chance Gensler goes for something in his last waning days. But at the end of the day, anything is better than the status quo, and we are seeing the market react accordingly.
Absolutely. So, Ron, has he accepted the nomination? What's that process like?
I believe so. He has. Trump usually wouldn't announce it unless he has formally accepted it. So what he's going to be doing now is following the direction of a lot of the other nominees, making the rounds on Capitol Hill. When he was at the SEC during the Bush administration, a lot of those senators weren't there. So he has to reacquaint himself with a lot of the senators and try to secure his nomination. I mean, overall, compared to a lot of the other picks out there, it seems like he's pretty non-controversial. Candidly, a lot of the picks in the financial services space, at least so far, have been very non-controversial as opposed to some of the other ones getting a lot more headlines here. So the good news is that we can probably move on nominations like his a lot more quickly than potentially some of the other ones are causing a little political hellstorm here. But of course, we do have Senator Warren, who's going to be leading a lot of those confirmation hearings, especially for the SEC. And what direction does she take? And how does she have a relationship with this SEC chair? Because it is vastly different than what it's going to be these past 4 years. And so, really curious to see how that dynamic plays out, because that's going to be telling of how Congress is going to be both having oversight of the SEC, but also how Elizabeth Warren is going to play a role, as while she's in the minority, she still has some power as the now ranking member of the Senate Banking Committee.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting to watch and see what rhetoric she uses. Will she step back a bit and not to go the anti-crypto army route? So that's going to be an interesting thing. So when does he actually go into office? Is it, sometime in January?
No, it'll probably be more potentially in March timeframe or April. It really just depends on how quickly they can get the committees organized to move forward with this. And that's been a big theme we've been seeing with the Republicans recently, is that they understand that they only have pretty much these next 2 years in the full majority. It's a very fleeting time to have all branches of power here, and they need to hit the ground running. So a lot of the time, or things they're doing right now in DC, is preparing for hitting the ground, getting the committee selected, and moving forward the nominations as fast as possible. Because once they get done with the nominations, then Congress has to avoid a shutdown in March, or likely March. Then they have to go do a huge tax bill. And that's also in addition to all the other promises that Trump wants to get done in his first 100 days. So it's going to be a blitz in DC. And a lot of things are going to fall through the cracks. And there are a lot of things that are going to probably be done in the first 6 months versus the first 100 days. And so it's really hard to tell exactly when when soon-to-be chair, hopefully Atkins, takes over the SEC. But if I had to guess, I would probably say it's safe to say around April, May is a likely scenario, but we could see potentially June, July, or even earlier. So it just really depends on a lot of how Congress forms these hearings to begin with. But overall, again, pretty confident that given his non-controversial status, he's going to be a breeze compared to several others.
Do you think, and we're speculating here, that he may come in and say, hey, let's pause all these non-fraud cases, like against Coinbase, against Ripple, or wrap up the Ripple case and so forth and the others, where once again, no fraud, no scams. Do you think he might do something like that?
I've been talking to a lot of lawyers, both at these various companies, some involved in some of these lawsuits, others are just more on the outside here. And it's been a mixed bag in terms of what exactly is going to be the next steps here with those cases. Because you have to understand, a lot of these cases have progressed, like the Coinbase case, pretty significantly along the lines here. And you can't really drop it this far into the process here. But it does have a lot of conflicts here, where you have the SEC saying potentially, hey, look, these are securities. Meantime, you have, potentially Chair or Commissioner Peirce, as well as Atkins, hopefully leading the charge, saying, hey, guess what? Actually, those SEC actions or decisions that were made to go with the lawsuit, we don't agree with that anymore. And so the idea is like they have to either wrap up that case because it conflicts with the current or soon-to-be chair's priorities, or they maybe go through a settlement or something to that effect. But largely, it's still unclear with a lot of the lawyers I talked to how exactly these are going to close up. And we still have a lot still processing as well. So, and we still have to see if the current SEC appeals any of these decisions too. Like the Blockchain Association, we got a recent win in the dealer rule that you had a great interview with Laura Sanders about. But there's a chance there's an appeal there as well. So again, a lot of this stuff we have to wait and see. But a lot of this stuff also has progressed pretty far enough where they just can't drop it like a hat. And then lastly, I'll say there's a lot of still questions about the current Wells notices out. So you have OpenSea and your Uniswap, for example. The question is, do those go to a full suit, or do those just stay in the Wells notice stage and nothing happens with it? It's still unclear. So we'll have to wait and see.
If Congress is able to get legislation through, let's say through the Senate, and we're going to talk a bit about the lame duck coming up, could that be used by Chair Atkins to say, hey, look, the laws have changed, we need to adjust these things? Or is it still stuck in the legal process where, to your point, we have to wait and see how do they navigate these things?
Well, the main problem is that you have to have Congress act, and that takes a lot. As someone who's been on the lobbying side for 5 years here, it can get really slow and all of a sudden ramps up the last seconds. And I don't think we'll see anything in this lame duck here. And as I laid out the timeline with the nominations and stuff like that, it's very likely that we'll have these bills kind of hit mainstream in terms of like votes on the House floor, votes on the Senate floor. I mean, probably the earliest June or July, but more likely a fall scenario, just because they have the litany of stuff they have to get through beforehand. And so like, there's going to be several months here where there's going to see some developments in those cases. So it might be a moot point at that stage. But I'm trying to warn folks here. It's not like, in January and February, we're going to get a market structure bill signed into law, Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. There's a lot of stuff Congress has to do, both just formationally, just to get the Congress going, but also more to get the administration going and getting those nominations in. And it just takes up bandwidth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know sometimes we get tunnel vision and we think, okay, crypto is the biggest thing, and but there's so many other things happening in the world, obviously. And we know government doesn't move as fast as we would like. So we'll have to wait and see. But to your point, the overarching theme here is that at least there won't be this aggression, the regulation by enforcement, and companies having to worry. It'll be much more of an open door. Maybe the SEC. While they may not be able to drop the lawsuits right away, they could create a better way to register. And, companies don't have to worry about coming in and the fear of getting stabbed in the back.
Well, that was the whole thing. I mean, Hester Peirce, I'll never forget when she was telling me at the Texas Blockchain Council about 2, 3 years ago. The last question I asked her at the panel was, all right, so what would you do if your company and the SEC, like FinHub or some division says, we want to come in and just hear about your product? And her advice was explicitly, I would not come in. I would not go in, even if the agency requests it. It's a trap. And we like the industry knew that for a while, that a lot of the companies that did go in and talk to the SEC ended up getting a Wells notice a couple days later. But to have an SEC commissioner explicitly say that 2 years ago, and that's very telling of these past 4 years. I think the upside is that now we have a very much of an open door. And I've already been chatting with a lot of the folks at the SEC. We've had an open door for years, but you can just tell the other companies who are coming in and talking to the key players, they're really excited. We're going to have another Democrat commissioner now that has to be replaced for Lizarga. So we got a pro-crypto Democrat potentially there. So there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of excitement. A lot of people are ready to get going here in DC, but it's going to get, when we get into the nitty gritty, it's going to get pretty dicey, I would say. At least, there's a lot of vested interest, both with TradFi coming in, a lot of DeFi folks trying to get, at least carve their way out to make sure that they're protected from overregulation in these early stages. But this is all going to be very exciting, but it's going to be contentious. So buckle up.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any upcoming hearings that we should know about? I know we're wrapping up by the end, the end of the years here, but anything that's on your calendar that we should know about?
Well, there was one yesterday, actually. So we had, at least from the Blockchain Association membership, the CEO of Anchorage, as well as the CEO of Stellar. They were testifying in front of House Financial Services. Full committee. It was Patrick McHenry's last hearing. It was a very sentimental. But at the same time, it was actually really eye-opening for a lot of members publicly, because the debanking narrative, for example, really got mainstream through the Joe Rogan podcast with Mark Andreessen. And Tony, to your point about crypto having tunnel vision, we've been talking about debanking for years now. But all of a sudden, this whole new spectrum of people have learned about this issue, and now it's a hot topic again on Capitol Hill. And we learned Anchorage, Stellar, they both publicly testified that they got debanked. Yeah. So that was very, telling. And I think it was good to have other members, especially Democrats, hear explicitly from the CEO saying we got debanked not once, but several times in some cases. So I think we'll see a lot more of the debanking stuff really heating up in the early parts of the year for hearings. It could probably tee up an executive order for Trump to do pretty early on, or move some legislation that the Republicans have been trying to push for years now to prevent any kind of debanking whatsoever of this stage. So I would look to that early on. And again, the nominations are going to be really important as well in the first early stages of the new Congress here. And that's going to be likely February, January, and March timeframe. And can always be a surprise. So we'll see. But so far, it seems pretty consistent. And then finally, while the Senate's really, taking a lot of time in the nominations, the House is going to be doing a lot of the early stages for both the tax fight. That's going to be coming up pretty soon, because there are going to be a lot of crypto provisions we're pushing for in this big tax bill that Congress is going to likely address sometime April and May timeframe. And then B, they're going to be working on teeing up the stablecoin bill again and Fit 21. And so watch for the House for the bills that are bubbling to the surface, which will probably bubble to the surface again fall or summer of 2025. And then watch the nominations more on the Senate side. And that's going to, really place a lot of these hopefully pro-crypto picks solidly in the Trump administration, so we can get some good regs as well as some executive orders on the books.
Ron, there's a lot of talk about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. There's also a global competition and conversation happening. You're hearing Putin talk about Bitcoin. Just yesterday, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said, Bitcoin's not a threat to the US dollar. The narrative is there, but as you were mentioning, government moves slow. Will Congress get these things through? What percentage chance are you giving this Bitcoin strategic reserve of getting passed next year? Especially, it's on Donald Trump's radar that he's really been talking about it a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, personally, again, I've heard a lot of different things on this issue. I've been talking to folks, obviously, on the transition team as well, but mostly industry and Congress on this issue. Again, I've heard a lot of different things, but my read of the whole situation is that the Trump proposal is more about not selling current Bitcoin holdings the United States government has from like seizures, or from DOJ or FBI, from criminal investigations. Whereas, the other proposal, Senator Lummis is leading this reserve portion, where the idea the government actually buys more Bitcoin to, pay off the debt or to hold and such. The thing, at least for the Lummis proposal, that likely requires a piece of legislation. So Trump just can't sign saying, we're going to buy X amount of Bitcoin. He's got to go through Congress for that. And, as we know, Congress takes a long time to do anything. And at least right now at this stage, the Lummis proposal doesn't have any Democrats, nor does it have a House companion. So by no means is it impossible, but those are pretty, tough things to overcome early on. I'm sure they'll probably get a Democrat supporter or co-sponsor for the next iteration. But in terms of getting done next year, it's very, very, very slim. And as you've seen, like for stablecoins, we can agree on 98% of this issue. It could be the last 2% that can get Leo Brainerd to kill the bill, or to make a call to kill it through Democrat support against it. So, there's a lot of things that can happen here, but right now, that's a bill that has a lot longer of a pathway versus a stablecoin bill or FIT 21. And even then, those bills still have a uphill climb in a Republican in Congress.
That's great insight, because a lot of people are curious about that. And to your point, where Lummis, her bill doesn't have the necessary support yet. But to your point, the 200,000 plus Bitcoin that the U.S. government has seized, the U.S. Marshals, people are tracking that it's being moved to Coinbase custody or something like that, and that could be the big win, at least, right? Trump's coming out and saying, "Hey, look, we're not selling this 200,000 Bitcoin; we're keeping it as a reserve."
Exactly. I mean, Trump tweeted this morning about the 100K. I'm sure this is going to hit his radar too. He's on X and Truth Social a lot, in Fox, as we know. But at least at this stage, that's just kind of what we're seeing. Again, those political dynamics can really shift rapidly. And there's been a lot of good advocacy from the Bitcoin folks, especially. And Senator Lummis has been tweeting about this, I think, 3 or 4 times a day here. So it's risen in prominence. When it was first kind of like introduced, yes, it made a big splash, and then kind of died down in terms of activity of people really interested. And it's ramped back up. So who knows, with this bull market, we could see a cataclysmic event in terms of support. But at least right now, again, at this stage, it's just hard to see that happening next year.
Yeah, I'm hoping for a surprise like we saw with Fit 21, but that's hoping. We have to be realistic as well. But if we can get a nice, pleasant surprise in Q2, maybe like you're hinting, that would be really awesome. Ron, thank you, man, and I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon at the Blockchain Association Summit. It's coming up on the 16th and 17th, right?
That's right. Yep. I was just in DC. I got back at midnight last night. So I'm here at Art Basel for a couple events on the NFT side. And then I'll be back in DC for the summit. So it's going to be great. We're going to have a lot of good speakers, and a lot of the key power players, which I'm excited. So like Tim Scott, for example, Senate Banking Chair, Bill Hagerty, like these are going to be key players in the Senate. And then we're going to have Mick Henry, French Hill, and several other key House leads. So you get to hear kind of like that perspective of what's going to be happening at the House side and what's going to be happening Senate side. And I'm glad we wrapped up because my ring light just died.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ron.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.